Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Right.
So before I start the text, and I certainly want to make sure we do cover the text, we were discussing how it's fundamental within the tradition of acquiring wisdom, that is one of the purposes of life. And Morris was mentioning that he had asked different people about that. Morris, do you mind commenting?
I asked my patients, uh, I was interested in what wisdom, I'm still interested in what wisdom is, but I asked patients uh, to write a little essay about wisdom, and I got a few responses, and it was quite striking how different wisdom is for a 25-year-old, for a 45-year-old, a 65-year-old, or an 85-year-old. So that's
Right,
my
right.
message.
So, for me, I would say that, learning from experience is perhaps the greatest, that is part of the process of gaining wisdom, that we come into this life and we make mistakes. We're not perfect, otherwise there'd be no sense in us being created to begin with. And we try to learn from those mistakes, and it's unwise not to learn from mistakes. And of course, to be able to learn from mistakes, you have to say, this was a mistake. And I know I've made many mistakes in the course of my life, but hopefully I've been able to learn from some of them. I hope so, anyway. So I also like, there's some statements that I think are fundamental. One is Hillel's great, great rule, which is what is hurtful to you, don't do to others. If you don't achieve that, you have missed out on something fundamental. What is hurtful to you, don't do to other people. The world would be different, a different place if people actually paid attention to that. And then when I moved from St. Louis to Santa Rosa, I felt there were mistakes I had made that I needed to learn from. One was that for sure you need to live life in a forward direction. You can't, it's one thing to learn from the past, but to live in the past is a mistake. We have to be in forward gear. And then I developed four basic principles. They can be summarized by the acronym RFA. RFA. The first thing is appreciation. I learned this actually from another rabbi who said something that has affected me profoundly, which is that the essence of spirituality is appreciation. That if you don't learn how to appreciate the world, its beauty, the miracles that constantly surround us, you will not be able to develop a spiritual attitude. So, and also, of course, to learn how to express that appreciation to other people, to the people around you, not just your intimate friends, but even to strangers, to recognize just how much we depend on the goodness of other people and their own generosity. And that's been a great, great lesson for me, that learning how to express appreciation, it's like a tonic for people. And the second thing is respect. You don't need to love everybody, and in fact, it's impossible to love everybody, but it is possible to be respectful of everybody. This person could be your mortal enemy, but you could still treat them with respect. And respect basically is what is hateful to you, don't do to other people. That's a sort of fundamental element of respect. The F of Arfe is forgiveness. If you're unable to forgive people, for one, you should never get married if you can't forgive. But it's so, so important. And part of what helps me is in recognizing my own faults, or trying to recognize my own faults, is not to expect other people to be perfect. And even the people who may have been, you know, caused me problems, etc., I've tried to be respectful no matter what. Okay. And the E of Orphe is encouragement. People need encouragement. It's so important. There are times when we feel sad and overwhelmed and stuff like that. And so being able to encourage people and to use our words to be able to encourage people, I think is very, very important. This is sort of what I learned when I moved initially from St. Louis to Santa Rosa and recognized that these were very, very fundamental things. And I wonder if you could summarize all of these four things, and there may well be other things as well, but essentially we're talking about chesed, kindness. And there's a wonderful statement. It's actually Psalm, I think it's 83, maybe verse 3, if I'm not mistaken. Could be verse 8, Psalm 89. I don't remember the exact, citation. But basically it says, Olam chesed yibaneh, that the world is built up on kindness. And the implication of that, because we have a principle that says from positive you can infer negative, and from negative you can infer positive. That means that if we make the statement, the positive statement, that the world is built up on kindness, the implication is that the world is destroyed by unkindness. And learning how to be kind and is again one of the essences of wisdom. And a part of the purpose of wisdom is learning how to be kind. One of my favorite, gosh, soapbox issues is that we talk about love, and we so often confuse love and lust. We think the two are the same, and they're not. Okay, lust is an appetite. Love is a behavior. Love is how we treat other people. Love involves generally sacrifice. Lust involves satisfying yourself. So it's a shame that we confuse those two words so often. And again, I think there are lots of problems that result from that. Morris, you may be regretting the fact that you raised this issue, but
I have one other thing to add,
yes, go ahead.
and it's the thing that I've learned. I take this class on communication,
Hmm.
and the most important uh, part of communication
Hmm.
is one word, and it's listening.
Hmm.
And that all the things that you talk about, underlying all that
Yes,
is listening to other people.
right. True. It's very true. Isn't it lovely that the very first word of the Shema is Shema, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so interesting that in Hebrew, the word for listening is also a word for understanding. So thank you. I appreciate what you just said. It really is. And that, by the way, is a fault of mine, is learning how to listen and to be silent, to really listen to what someone has to say. Yeah. I appreciate your saying that. It's true. It's true. Okay, with that, we will go into our text. And we're still, of course, we're coming slowly to the end of Parshat Toldot. And here we are, remember, talking about the conversation that Esau and Isaac are having after Esau has discovered, and Isaac for that matter, have discovered that Jacob has stolen the blessings, has tricked Esau out of the blessings. So, and Esau was asking Isaac whether there was anything at all with which he would bless him. And basically, Isaac was saying that Esau was not going to be able to benefit from agriculture, from gaining wealth through agriculture, etc., etc., and that his dwellings would be away from the dew of heaven above. But what was it going to be? Ve'al charbecha tichyeh, you shall live by the sword, by your sword. Ve'et achicha ta'avod, but you shall serve your brother. V'haya, however it shall be, ka'asher tarid right? When you bemoan that fact, and that's going to demand further explanation, which Rashi is going to give us in a moment. Ufarakta ulo me'al tzavarecha, you shall cast off his yoke, which is on your neck, which is on your neck. So it's very important that I explain this metaphor of the yoke on someone's neck. And it essentially, we speak very often about the yoke of the commandments. And if you think about what a yoke is, we're talking about the way in which an ox is guided. That what you do is that they have a beam or a couple of beams around the neck of an ox, and there are strings on either side, and the beam acts as a lever to pull the ox's head in a direction, one direction or another. And basically, the animal follows the way it's looking, and in this way, you can direct the ox as opposed to a horse, which has a very sensitive mouth. And for that reason, you can use a bridle with a piece of metal called the bit that is in that bridle that goes into the horse's mouth. And when you pull on the bridle, left or right, because the horse's mouth is sensitive, it'll turn its head in that direction. But an ox has a very stiff neck. It doesn't have a sensitive mouth, and it has a very stiff neck. And so you have to use basically leverage in order to pull the neck one way or another. And that is also a metaphor for stubbornness, stubbornness, the refusal to listen to instruction. And the Jewish people are called in some places stiff-necked. And the purpose of calling them stiff-necked meaning is referring to the resistance that they have to following the commandments. And that's why we talk about the yoke of the commandments, meaning that the commandments are there to guide our behavior. And because we are stiff-necked, we don't want to observe what the commandments are telling us to do. And that's the idea. So the idea of a yoke has to do with control and direction. And so we're saying here, Isaac is telling Esau that to the degree that Jacob is controlling Esau's life, because remember, Esau is a servant to Jacob. Therefore, what's going to happen is at some point he's going to cast that yoke off his neck. So that's a reasonably full explanation of the meaning of the Torah here. But let's take a look at Rashi here. So, um, right. So I think we have to explain the last part of, sorry, the first part of this sentence, right? The al harbacha, and the word al, it means on your sword. However, Rashi says that the Hebrew va'al and on, which usually means on, kamo becharbacha, it can take the place of the prefix meaning with your sword. So in other words, you shall live with your sword. Yesh al, he says there are times when the word al, shehu bimkom ot bet, that it comes to take the place of the letter bet. And of course, the letter bet meaning with or in. Kamor, and he gives examples. This looks like Ezekiel chapter 33. Amadatim al charbechem, meaning you shall stand. Literally, you might think it means stand on your swords, but it means you shall stand with your swords, right, or through your swords. An example from Exodus chapter 6, Al Tziv Otam, it talks about the Israelites leaving, and it's literally, again, it could mean on their troops. It means Bet Otam, in other words, with their troops. For going on now, here's this phrase for hayaka sher tarid. So the word tarid, this root here is in a way it's a play of words. However, Rashi wants to tell us. So the root yarad normally means to go off, to take off or to go off to. or to go down, yarad. Right? So we talk about aliyah, going up, yerida, going down. Right? So he says it also is lashon, it's an expression, tsar. It can be an expression of suffering, suffering. So for example, if you lose something, if you go down, if you we actually use in English, we talk about feeling down, meaning feeling depressed. So clearly, there's sort of a universal sense that when you speak about something down, we have a level of suffering involved. He gives an example from Psalm 55, Arid besichi, right? So it means sort of, I bemoan in my speech, right? I express my suffering. Klomar, that is to say, Kesheya, now he's saying in regards to this sentence here in Genesis that we're dealing with, the sentence that is referring to what Isaac is saying to Esau. Kesheya avru Yisrael hal Torah. When Israel transgresses the Torah, when they transgress the Torah, and now you will have an excuse. Lehitzdarer, to grieve al habrachot, on the blessings, shinatal, which he took, ufarakta ulo, and at that point you can remove his yoke. So this is actually a tremendously important principle, that the blessings and the position of the Jewish people has to do with a level of merit. We have to earn these blessings. There is a level of grace, meaning undeserved blessing. There's a level of it. We have to have some of it. But on the other hand, there's essentially a mandate to earn the blessings that we give. And what Isaac is saying to Esau here is that the blessings that Jacob just took, which he is going to receive, if in fact he and his descendants, if he or his descendants choose to abandon, right, abandon the mandate that goes along with those blessings, to serve God with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their might, if they do that, Pitchon Peh means an excuse. You Esau, will now have a reason to say to God, why are you blessing them? Why are you blessing them? They don't deserve these blessings. And I think that is such an amazing value, right? That it is the absolute reverse of entitlement. And if you think of the degree to which people feel entitled to good things and don't feel they have to earn them, it is in some ways a spiritual disease. And the idea of trying to live life to avoid entitlement at all costs, and to recognize that the degree to which we hope to be blessed has to be earned, is something that it would be wonderful if we could really teach our children and teach humanity to live in this particular way. So there's an incredible lesson going on here in this sentence that if we analyze it carefully and see what's really going on. So yes, Jacob did get the blessing, but I think the very fact that those blessings were received in an ironic kind of way means that Jacob has to work hard, right? Has to really work hard to deserve those blessings. And I will go out on a limb and say that the ability of the Jewish people to gain the land of Israel is likewise based on their merit. That's certainly very clear in the Bible itself. I think it is actually a universal principle. And to say that we don't really own anything. We have to, in a sense, we rent, right? And what we have to do is make sure that we're worthy of these particular kinds of things. And the degree to which Israel, that is to say, the title that Israel has, that the Jewish people have to the land of Israel, is directly connected to the degree to which they are righteous, that they practice ways of righteousness. And of course, we know that that's ultimately based on the Torah. It's one thing to talk about righteousness, but then you have to start deconstructing what exactly righteousness involves. What is it to have righteous behavior? And I think we were trying to discuss that a little bit in the introduction to this particular lesson when we were just talking about trying to gain wisdom. So let's make sure we did right. On to the next verse. Vayistom Esav et Yaakov. Esau harbored hatred for Jacob. Al habracha, regarding the blessing. Asher beracho aviv, with which his father had blessed him. Vayomer Esav belibo, and Esau said in his heart. This again underscores this word amar, this root amar, which is usually translated as said, and the fact is that the word amar can mean to think. And Amar belibo is clearly saying that he kept thinking, right? This is what his thoughts were involved in. This is what he thought. Yikrevu yemei evel avi, let the days of mourning for my father draw near. Va'aharga et Yaakov achi, and I will slay Jacob my brother. So he didn't remember. I think Esau was aware that he was his father's favorite. At least it says that at the beginning of Parsha Toldot. Whether in fact that is still the case at this particular point in time of the story is a question. However, at least let's say that Esau believed that, and so he didn't want to do anything that he thought would upset his father, at least in this particular way. So there are also interpretations that say the very fact that Esau was saying, let the days of my father's demise come soon, right? That in fact he was harboring an idea possibly of murdering his father as well. At least it was in his mind. It's possible. Let's take a look here. Okay. Yikrevu yemei evel avi. Let the days of mourning for my father draw near. Kamashma'o. He says that's exactly as it implies. Right? Take it for what it's worth. Shelo etzar et abba. He says, so that I don't cause my father anguish. Umidrash agada. So now Rashi says there are midrashim, right? There are many midrashim, lakama panim yesh, that explain this in various different ways. And one of those midrashim may be the one that I just mentioned. Onwards. Vayugad lerivka et divrei Esav b'na hagadol. It was told to Rebekah the words of her older son Esau. Vatishlach, and so she sent Vatikra Yaakov b'na. She called to her son Jacob b'na hakatan, her younger son Jacob. Vatomer elav, and she said to him, Hine, indeed, Esav achicha, Esau your brother, mitnachem lecha, he is consoling himself about you, lahargecha, so it's lahorgecha, to slay you. Okay. The question is how exactly to pronounce this. I think it is lahorgecha. I'd be certain if there were a dot in the Gimel. So it could be La Hargecha. Sometimes the print in this particular edition isn't altogether clear, and so I'm not absolutely certain how that
Maybe I can
should be
help you
pronounced.
out. Okay, let's
Okay,
get, because I have the art scroll in front of me.
okay.
So, all right. So which letter are you in
You see
question
the
about?
last sentence, the last word in verse 42? La
Uh,
Hargecha. Is there a dot in the Gimel, or
Hang
does
on a
it?
second. I'm getting there
Okay.
because I'm back to the Torah.
Okay. I actually,
There is. You're asking if is there a dot in the Gimel? No,
yes.
there is not.
Okay, so it could be la hargecha. It's a grammatical rule that in a closed The question is this a closed syllable? So if there were a dot in the gimel, then for sure this would be a closed syllable. Okay? Because when a letter, there are six letters that when they start a syllable, they take a dot. Gimel is one of them. And so and then it has an influence on the previous syllable as to whether this is an open syllable. An open syllable ends in a vowel, a closed syllable ends in a consonant. So that's a very fundamental rule of grammar. And this particular vowel is sometimes pronounced as an ah, and sometimes it's pronounced as an or. They're actually two different vowels that are printed in the same way. And without wanting to get too much further afield in the grammar of this, I do have a tikkun that would indicate how this needs to be pronounced. At any rate, it means to kill you. So, so the question is, it was told to Rivka, but it doesn't tell us who told Rivka. Who told Rivka? It was told to her. Rashi says, Baruch HaKodesh. It was with the Holy Spirit. The term Holy Spirit means essentially prophecy. It means the ability to receive messages from the divine. So, in other words, she was able to see through her ability as a prophet. Beruach HaKodesh Hu Gadla, it was told to her through the spirit of prophecy. In other words, no person told her about this. Remember, it just said that Esau was thinking this to himself, so it wasn't necessarily verbalized. But regardless, she was able to determine that this is what he was thinking. Ma she'esav meharher belibo. Rashi says it quite explicitly. What Esau is contemplating in his heart. In other words, even though he didn't share this with anyone else, Rivka understood this. She was aware of it. Mitnachem lachad. Again, the Hebrew here is sort of interesting, right? Because the root nacham, right, can mean to console, like we talk about tanchumim, right, consolations. We talk about menachem avelim. We talk about consoling the bereaved, but it can also mean to regret or to change your mind. And it's possible that they're linked, that these ideas are linked in this word, because when you console someone, you're trying to get them to change their feelings and change their mind in some way or another. So it can encompass all these various uh, ideas. So here we go. Here Rashi explains. Okay, I believe. Okay, nichem al ha'achava. He regrets or he regretted the sense of friendship. Achava is from a word that means brother. Okay, so in other words, he regrets the fraternity, the sense of brotherhood. Lachshov, because of course Jacob was his brother. Lachashov machshava acheret, in order to think a different thought. Lehitnaker lacha ulaharcha. In other words, as he's thinking towards Jacob, he's thinking to act as a stranger towards you in order to kill you. Right. So very often the idea of being able to kill someone else, often it has to do with the fact that you don't know that person from Adam, you don't really know them, and you have neutral feelings, and so it's not difficult to kill that individual or to destroy something. Umidrash Agada, there's actually another midrash, which again is based on this particular word. Kvar ata met be'enav, right? In his eyes, you are as dead. He considers you dead already. Veshata alecha, and he is, again, this is a metaphor. He is drunk regarding you. Kos shel tanchumim, the cup of consolation. So again, of course, this term cup of consolation has to simply do with the idea of that when you drink something, it gets into your body, it fills you. So in other words, that his feelings, he's consoling himself by the idea of your being dead. Ulefi pshuto, but according to the simple meaning of the sentence, lashon tanchumim, right? Again, he says it has to do with an expression of consolation. Mitnachem hu, he is consoling himself al habrachot baharigatcha, regarding those blessings in the thoughts of killing you. He doesn't mind so much anymore. He's getting consolation about what happened, about the fact that you, Jacob, were blessed in the idea of your being killed. And on that, I'm afraid, somewhat negative note, we're going to stop here and we'll pick it up tomorrow with this, with the next verse here, right there. All right. So, any thoughts, any considerations?
Very interesting material.
Yes, it is.
The backstory.
Yeah, I know. It's an amazingly profound story, and it just
Yes.
has it's such a beautiful example of the depth of Torah and how it's capable of, giving us really very profound ideas and thoughts.
Did Cain have the same reason
Ah, ah.
after
Um, Yes,
Esau
on
had?
some levels. Harlan, yes, very interesting. That's great that you should think about that. So, of course, Cain was deeply jealous of Abel because God had accepted Abel's offering and had not accepted his offering. And so he was jealous of Abel. But the profound thought there is that as we interpret that in tradition, Abel, it says specifically, brought the best of his flocks. In other words, the gift he was offering to God represented a true sacrifice because he was giving up from the best of his flocks. And with Cain, he just simply brought whatever was at hand. So he didn't deserve it. In other words, so what the Torah is saying is that sometimes when we're jealous of someone else, right? I like to say success guarantees one thing, and that is there are going to be people who are going to be jealous of you for that, for your success. But how often do we look at ourselves and say, did we deserve to be successful? Did we earn that success? And again, this sort of ties into what I was saying in today's lesson as well, right? The idea of entitlement. It's, I learned this from Lauren Bushbaum, I will tell you, that whole concept of entitlement. So I will stop
What
there.
about the
Go
Rabbi?
ahead, I'm sorry. Yep.
What about the situation from Esau's perspective?
Yes.
Here he was at one point, Yitzchak's favored,
Yes.
and suddenly he's out. He's passed over. However, whether
Right.
he contributed to it or it was taken from him,
Mhm.
the story goes that he came in. He gave up his birthright for a meal or soup or whatever.
Mhm.
But the point is that, uh, and he must have done something right for Yitzchak to have favored him at some
Yes.
point.
Okay. So the Torah is explicit about it. All right. Yitzchak, and again, what's so beautiful about the Torah is there are no human beings that are perfect. Okay. There's no human being, not even Moses, right? There's good. There's some who are much better than others who are really seriously righteous, but no one is perfect. And it says that Isaac liked Esau because Esau would bring him meat. He'd go out and hunt and bring his father game. It says, literally, it says that Isaac had a taste for game.
Yes, I
And
know. I'm
so,
familiar with
so
that.
okay, so that is the only reason given as to why Esau was the favored one. However, before we got to this stage here, we read about how Esau goes and marries these Canaanite women and how they're a source of aggravation to both Isaac and Rebekah. And there's going to be a reference to that in just a little bit as we go on with this particular parsha. I think that the thing about what Esau represents is narcissism. In other words, he looks on the short term as to what's going to benefit him. And in that sense, not everybody has the same level of intelligence, one person as another, but your merit doesn't depend on your intelligence, except the degree to which you use whatever intelligence you're gifted with. So that you may not be a great person, but the truth is, I think life will teach us that being able to live a modest life and one that doesn't involve narcissism and just trying to benefit and satisfy our appetites actually is a very good life and a worthy life. The very fact that Esau is described as a hunter, it's not the first time the Bible uses that term, but the idea, that from a Jewish perspective, hunting is not something that is necessarily a Jewish value. And the idea of hunting is that what you try to do in order to hunt is you have to essentially trick, right? Trick your prey so that you can then, capture them. And so the idea also gets extended in terms of how you treat people. And Esau has being described as a hunter is the idea that he'd go out. And it's interesting, of course, that Jacob is tricking. In the story, we see about Jacob tricking Esau, but that Esau, as described as a hunter, essentially does whatever he needs to do to be able to trick or take advantage of other people as well. We see this behavior even nowadays. Some of the people who actually became tremendously wealthy actually did it by means of trickery. It's very interesting. I mean, the Torah is so filled with fundamental truths, and there are people who clearly are fabulously wealthy. Not every single person, but a number of people who are actually became extremely wealthy. But the way they gained that wealth was through hunting, through trickery, through taking advantage of other people. The Torah is commenting on that. It's not,
Well, Jacob also was tricky,
yes, and he got paid back for it.
and he got
That's the
paid back.
point.
Yeah,
He got paid back.
by
Towards the end,
11.
he's a
Yeah.
very different person. What I always have loved for a long, long time about the story of Jacob is that we see character development here in the Torah as literature. That Jacob, of his old age and development, after he goes through and suffers from quite serious tragedies in his life, right? He loses the people he loves the most, he loses. And thank God with Joseph, he sees Joseph towards the end of his life. And I think in losing the people he loves so much, he gains wisdom. He gains wisdom. And he softens. He's a much softer person towards the end of his life than he is at the beginning of his life.
There
So,
was jealousy with the brothers. That's what happened. Jealousy again.
well, if you think about it, a lot of the world's problems have to do with that. One country being jealous of another country, and leaders being jealous of others. Look at politics, at how politics is played out. It's all there. So with this, I'm going to stop the recording.